Hey, what's up, you guys? It is your host, Erika L. Day. Welcome back to the PHNX Mercury podcast. I am joined today by my esteemed colleague, Stephen Garner. Stephen, how are you?
What's going on, Erika? I'm blessed. How about you doing? How you doing today? Yeah. How about you? How you doing today?
Sorry, Stephen, my audio went out there, but we are back. And we are joined behind the scenes today by my you guys probably get the running joke by now. My favorite producer, Jacob Franklin. The very first producer Erika was ever privileged enough to work with. So I'm pretty excited that we're joined today by him behind the scenes. But we've got a good show planned for you guys. And let's just start off by getting through the housekeeping that we do at the beginning of every single episode. And today, all we really have to tell you guys is that we will be live on Monday and Thursday, just like this week, next week. So if you're used to this schedule, just stay used to it. Keep it keyed into your Google Calendar. Nothing changes next week. But while we're on the topic, I do want to give a big shout out to the PHNX diehards. They've been keeping my life very hectic in the group chats. And if you're not a part of the PHNX diehard community, what are you doing? You get a free t-shirt, a membership card. You get to hang out with me, Jacob Franklin, and Stephen Garner in a group chat all day long. So personally, I don't know what the heck we're doing, but go to gophnx.com, sign up for that. And while you're there, you can stop by the link to buy tickets to our takeover event, which is happening on August 26th versus the New York Liberty. We are going to begin our evening over at God, it was right on the tip of my tongue. And now it's gone. But yeah, the Desmond. Yes, the Desmond. We're going to begin our evening at the Desmond, have a few drinks, say hello, eat some cookies, some snacks, pregame meal, and then head on over to the Footprint Center. I know Steven's excited to come back to the Footprint Center where we're all spoiled rotten with grand old Mercury promotions and whatnot. Steven, are you excited to come back to Phoenix?
Of course I am. Like I said before, I stand 10 toes on it. Be there, be square. Ain't much else to speak on about it.
Facts. Well, let's get to it. We got to see some Mercury members take the floor today. We also got to see some Mercury members not take the floor today in Team USA's matchup versus Belgium in the group round of the Olympics. Obviously, Team USA took a 13-point victory over the Belgium squad, but it was a scrappy game from start to end, and Belgium never really seemed to go away.
Well, for anybody that's been paying attention to the W and Team USA in particular, going up against international teams, no team has given them more of a push to the finish line than the Belgian national squad. And their most recent matchup prior to today took place in February, where it took a bizarre buzzer beater from Breanna Stewart to ultimately win that game. Now, fast forwarding into today, Mike Tebow, former coach of the Washington Mystics, now in the front office, and his son is coaching the team. There are some pretty thorough connections with him and the Belgian national team, in particular with one Emma Mieseman. And I believe it was Cheryl Reeve that was mentioned to have noted that they felt like with their game plan back in February, the game where the U.S. national team won by just 1 point, that they had a little bit too much focus on Emma. And though they took her away from her scoring production, everybody else was able to do pretty much what they wanted to into their particular role with that team. So the adjustment in this game was to obviously still do a great job on Emma, because Emma is the ultimate trigger for that team, but also find ways to take away things from other players. And for 2.5 quarters, almost 2 3/4 quarters, that wasn't quite what happened. We saw the Belgian national team knock down a handful of three-pointers. Emma Mieseman made every pass under the sun and did not care about who her particular matchup was, who she was guarded by, or what the coverage and scheme was. She was throwing passes like Magic Johnson back in the 80s. And it had that type of impact and feel on the game too. So needless to say, she's a handful. We tried to warn our beloved listeners and viewers prior to that Emma is a problem. She can go toe-to-toe with any of the front court pieces in the W. And if she was in the W, she would be a top 7 front court piece in the league. So she had that type of impact on the game, and her team fell directly in alignment with that. Julie Van Loo, making every pass under the sun, taking every shot under the sun, knocking down tough contested bucket after floater, after layup, after contested three-pointer. It was tough. Valiant effort from the Belgian national squad. The USA ultimately came out on top, but it was not without being pushed to the brink of their abilities. What was your assessment of the game, Erika? How did it make you feel? Was it like a playoff or a WNBA finals type feel for you? Did it feel like a gold medal game to you? Like, talk us through your feel during the game.
That is one thing. I turned on the game, and I just want to say USA Network needs to do a little bit better job of getting me the tip. I've actually expressed it to Stephen before how important tip-off is to me, and they just negate it. Every game I've watched, I just miss tip, and I'm over it. I've had enough. That being said, though, the vibes there looked absolutely incredible. The crowd was into it from beginning to end. I kept hearing the announcers. Our girl LaChina was talking about how the crowd was engaged up to even an hour before the game, and I'd imagine even so after. I mean, it was jumping in that place. That being said, obviously, the United States is the team that nobody in the crowd really wants to win, and they had a really fun time, which is honestly, it was fun to watch them have fun, and the vibes in the arena, you could just tell everyone was so excited to be playing basketball and competitive basketball, and it was like you said, it felt like a playoff WNBA game, and I think that's the one thing. We're through 2 games of the group phase now, and both games have had a playoff type feel because of how fast foreign teams play in comparison to the way that they play in the WNBA.
Yeah, that's a big thing. The pace and tempo, and Team USA working to find ways to garner the pace and play at the pace at which they desire to play at. It's been a lot of back and forth. It's been a lot of sparring, a lot of jabs, a lot of counter punching and adjusting from Cheryl Reeve and company. Whether that be via style of play, whether that be via lineups, going with 3 guard lineups, or switching to three forward lineups. They have the capacity and they have the versatility from top to bottom to do so. So just kind of seeing what her feel over the course of these games has been. And if she's leaning more towards, okay, I'm gonna have ATN with Stewie and BG, or ATN with Stewie and Asia, or BGN with Asia and Nafiza. There's just so many different lineup renditions that she can cycle through. It's just a matter of figuring out which one is the match that they need for this particular matchup and finding that out sooner than later. And I think some of that has been easier said than done. I mean, for crying out loud, we saw her cycle through probably, I don't have the particular number because it's hard to find lineup data for Olympic play, but she probably cycled through 18 different lineup renditions today, and that's a lot. Because we saw Chelsea Gray play her least minutes through the preliminary games as well as the first game against Japan from earlier this week. She played her least amount of minutes in this game. We saw Sabrina Ionescu play, I believe, her most minutes in the game so far. And there were other different changes within the lineup and rotation as well that were different than what we saw prior to. Diana did not play that much in the second half of this game. Kahleah didn't play at all in this game. And those are just all indicative of just the on-the-fly adaptability that Cheryl Reeve is displaying, trying to figure out, like I said, what lineup combinations, whether it's 3 guards and 2 forwards, 3 forwards and 2 guards, or sometimes 4 forwards and 1 guard, to figure out what each game is, demanding from the team. She figured it out, and in addition to figuring it out, back at the same conversation we had at the top of the last episode, Breanna Stewart is a walking, living cheat code. And by the same measure, in her ways that are unique to her, so is Asia Wilson. And by ways unique to her, also is Alyssa Thomas. And I feel like those pendulum swings with those 3 really just hitting and having their stamp and impact like I said, unique to those three individual players, showed up in multiple moments over the course of this game. Breanna Stewart's naturally being the absolute loudest, starting off the game, I believe, 4 for 4, and everything just kind of fell in place from there with her. But yeah, just really been fun watching them kind of shuffle the deck in real time and ultimately figuring things out on the fly, and ultimately, obviously, winning games as well in that same process.
Yeah, and obviously, me, Natasha Cloud, Sydney, we were all kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see our girl Kahleah Copper throw up some buckets in this game. That being said, though, Stephen and I kind of spoke to this in the last episode. Cheryl's going to do the right thing for the right matchup at the right time, and she's a good coach, and we don't have to backseat coach her. And frankly, I'm of the belief that Kahleah will get significant minutes at some point in this juncture, whether that is in the next game or the game after, who knows, but I personally am not of the belief that Kahleah Copper is going to spend this entire Olympic juncture on the bench.
No, I can affirmatively say that now. Kahleah Copper is going to play a major role with this team. Like I said, this is sometime last week. I think it was our first episode, our only episode from Monday of last week. It might not necessarily look the way it does when she's playing with the Phoenix Mercury, where she's been, for my money, and again, I'm not a betting man, but if I was to bet, I would have Kahleah firmly stamped as a top 5 basketball player in the WNBA this season, therefore a top 5 player in the world. It's not going to look the same in terms of usage and how she's featured and what her impact is. It might be a much abbreviated version of that in terms of looking at her impact on offense, but what she brings to the floor defensively, I think is something that this team is going to need to lean into more. Once these games continue to grow more meaningful as they transition from the group play phase and they really start getting to the nitty-gritty in terms of placing and point differential and all of those things that ultimately amount to a gold medal, which they're going for their 8th in a row now. It might not be the next game either, but at some point she's going to be called upon and she's going to be ready and she's going to show everybody why she is KFC. And you know what the F stands for. Word to Weezy F baby. And she's going to, like I said, just step up and be there for this team. So have a little patience with her. There's a lot of talent. This is very dull analysis, but there's a lot of talent on this team to the extent that where they don't have to rely on her or rely on any particular player to do any specific thing. So just kind of keep that context in mind, be a little patient with her, and enjoy the impact that other players like Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner are having on the team so far. Her time's gonna come, and when it comes, she's gonna show up like she always does.
And until it does come, you can laugh about it on the PHNX_Mercury's Twitter account with Erika all day long, every day. It's been pretty fun. That being said, though, like Stephen said, we did get to see Diana Taurasi start again, 2 consecutive games so far in this Olympics, and that's pretty exciting. She didn't score any points, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, I'm not. But that doesn't mean Diana didn't play. To Diana's, she played the entire first quarter in its pretty much entirety. Yeah. And again, she didn't score, but she was playing some very Diana-esque defense, and it was extremely fun to watch. And then again, kind of revisiting that same lineup that Stephen mentioned earlier, Asia and BG in the game together is really just a cheat code. It is so fun and exciting to watch. And honestly, like, I don't want to ask for something I can't have, but if we could just have that for one regular WNBA season, that would just be a dream.
I'm sure all 10 other teams in the W would love to have Asia or BG, let alone both of them on the same team. So
I'm just selfish, I know.
Absolutely, and that's okay. That's okay. But no, I just want to make sure we also appreciate Alyssa Thomas and everything that we're speaking to, because, well, even before I get to AT, you brought up Diana. There are things that don't show up on the box score that I mentioned as we were previewing the roster with Team USA that Diana checks off boxes with. And we talked about the leadership part. We talked about the experience part. And just that been there before, done that before, and being able to adapt on the fly and perform when the team needs it from her in particular. I think the other thing that I didn't necessarily emphasize when we were speaking directly to those dynamics pertaining to Diana, the physicality part. Now, naturally, yes, Asia and BG and Stewie and AT and Fee, they all bring that unique to their own style of play and dynamic over the course of a game. But from the guard position in specific, nobody brings more physicality than Diana in her older and advanced basketball stages of her career. She actually dictates with it. And yes, that toes the line of being too much sometimes, but it's good in process because it allows for them to set a tone where they're not going to be pushed around. And I think a game like today with Belgium, the Belgian national team, they were looking to set a tone and be physical to the legal limit. And we did not see a friendly whistle for Team USA in this game. I mean, Stewie and Asia were getting clocked upside the head the entire game, playing downhill profusely. And, the free throw totals did not show what they should have, in my personal opinion. That being said, though, having another player outside of your front court pieces that can play with the requisite level of physicality to not allow for things to sway into a disadvantage for your team, I think is important. Diana has a great sense of the moment for that. And she never passes up an opportunity to be physical. I mean, I think she got switched with Emma Miesemann or one of the other bigs for the Belgian national team today. And rather than just kind of conceding the space and trying to fight in the post, she just took the foul. She ate it, and she gave one solid push as the ball was on the flight to the recipient. Gave a solid push in the back, took the foul, didn't even argue it, just shrugged her shoulders and walked back over to her original matchup to reset plays from sideline out of bounds. And there's little moments like that are important in the process because she is stubborn. She's not going to allow for herself to be bullied, yet alone her teammates. And I think those things are really important in the process. But speaking to the other T on the team with AT, Alyssa Thomas, that's another player that I call in the most endearing way a true wrecking ball because she no nonsense. She comes into the game, the physicality level is up. It doesn't matter what team she's on, Team USA. It doesn't matter if she's playing it unrivaled. It doesn't matter if she's playing with Connecticut, the All-Star game. There's going to be a certain level of competing from everybody on the floor, and there's going to be a certain level of physicality. And those things are extremely important in balance when you have so much skill on a team like Team USA. And I think those things from those two players in particular are really important pillars in their general process. And I think that's why this team's construct is so good. And Asia even spoke to just the level of competing and rising to the occasion being a weapon that they have as an advantage over everyone else that she feels in her interpretation of everything. So those things are important to keep an eye on the physicality dynamic going forward because teams are going to continue to try Team USA. You can't keep up with them skill-wise, so the one way you can try to diminish some of that disadvantage is with physicality.
Absolutely. Like Matthew in the chat says, AT is a walking triple-double for sure. He's absolutely facts on that. I want to say AT had the funniest play of the whole game. She borderline picked a Belgian player up in play, and like I was dying laughing because she really had them in the air, and then she gets called for the foul, and she's like, "Rewind." I'm like, "Rewind what, girl? You had her feet off the ground. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And I think it's just something that's been so fun to watch is just the level of officiating and physicality in the national games it's been pretty exciting.
It has been. And I've loved the way that teams have tried Team USA early. And if they don't come out with that requisite level, they certainly adjust to it. If not by the end of the first quarter before halftime, and things kind of you start seeing things where they were like this, they start to really balance out and then go at advantage of Team USA. And I think kind of in all of that, their ability defensively to just be so scheme versatile, go from traditional matchups to switching to some cross matching, and to consistently be able to just cover up for one another. They've really, really, really been on a string defensively the last handful of games. And I think again we keep harping back to the game against the women's all-star team where Erika and had 34 in the second half. We just didn't see them hit this level. And I mentioned after that game following in our podcast that I felt like that was a blessing in disguise because it came from a game that did not count in terms of record, but it also didn't come against a foreign team. It came from your own. And it served as a just kind of a accountability point that they needed to get to a certain level before they went against other teams. And I think they took it as that, they processed it as that, and we've seen the defense turn multiple corners. I already talked about them flipping through different lineup renditions with guard heavy or forward heavy lineups. The switching, the hedging, the trapping, the communication, the activity levels and deflections and catch contests and all of these little things that really speak to a team that's on the same accord. They've really been showing it defensively the last handful of games.
Absolutely. And, I'm really excited to kind of watch how this plays out. We don't get to watch Team USA play again until Sunday. So I'm excited to watch that. I am honestly blanking on who they're even playing. Stephen, I bet Stephen knows.
No, I've been entirely too busy today, as you know.
That ain't no problem. Nonetheless, though, I'm really excited to talk about our squad, the Phoenix Mercury, and just what exactly it is we're kind of expecting to see from them come out of the gate and then into the playoffs. I think at this point, Steven and I have yapped enough throughout the season for you guys to know that the Mercury is very much built for the playoffs. It's not built to be some unbeaten team in the regular season, but they are built to win. But I think in order to be in a prime spot to do so, they need to finish out the rest of their season in a good spot. Something I really want to point out about the Phoenix Mercury schedule coming back from the break is that they don't have any road games. I'm sorry.
There you go.
The only consecutive road games that they have, there's only 2 road games back to back consecutively on the schedule at any point after the break. And I think that that's really important when you have a team that's built in the way that this one is, with a little bit of age, and they're all gonna, let's face it, be a little bit tired from the Olympics. And so I think coming back and getting to only take those shorter road trips is going to be really important to their legs. Nonetheless, and also just to set them up to be in a really good winning position for the playoffs. They're going to have a really good 5-game homestand somewhere in the middle, and then they get to end with Seattle at home. I think all 5 of those games, and on top of it, also closing the season with Seattle, all of them are going to be turning points for this team. But I think that closing game against Seattle is going to tell us exactly what team we're going to get in the postseason.
Yeah, they have a lot of things to sort out over this post-Olympic break stretch. And I think the fact that the Minnesota Lynx are a team that they very well could see, or not Minnesota Lynx, excuse me, the Seattle Storm are a team, like you mentioned, that they could very well see come playoff time, even potentially in the first round if things are close to shaking out the way that they are at this present moment. Something to keep in mind. So I think the first thing on the laundry list of things that I'm looking forward to them handling post-Olympic break, establishing the identity. And a lot of that is going to come with them being on the road, like you kind of already mentioned to a little bit, a road-heavy schedule post-Olympic break. I think it's important for them to figure things out in that particular context, because the way it's set up right now, they're not going to be hosting in the first round of any playoff situation that they might be in. Now, they can obviously climb the ladder if they play to their capabilities post-Olympic break, and I can see them jumping to 4th or even potentially 3rd if they handle their business in accordance. But you can't get to those steps and climb that ladder without establishing that identity piece. And that identity piece for me is on the defensive end of the floor. I think they've shown in spurts that they can be a timely stop team, but they have to be a little bit more than just a timely stop team, as they've shown to be through this first half and some change of the regular season. And they have to find some sustainability on that end of the floor. I think having BG healthy for a sustained stretch and like I talked about last episode, the proverbial second training camp where they really can kind of get back to ironing out the kinks in terms of their weaknesses on that end of the floor and really nailing the communication and all the little intricacies within their defensive process. They can get back to those things and really start working towards progress there against a multitude of opponents, like I mentioned, specifically on the road, is important. And the sooner they figure that part out, the sooner they'll be able to start looking more like the team in terms of record that we've been anticipating seeing coming into this season.
Yeah, and I think, Steven and I have high expectations for this team, but I think it's fair to say that this team also has high expectations for them. And they want to deliver on those, right? And I think to start the schedule back off on the road against the Sky and this Fever is also putting this team in an extremely advantageous spot, in my opinion. I think that when you have a young team like the Sky and the Fever, they're going to have to kind of readjust to playing games. And the Phoenix Mercury don't have to do that. These players are all seasoned vets at this point. They know what they're doing. This isn't their first go round of an Olympic break either. So I think that this is going to be a really good test on the road for them. They've really flailed on the road, and I think it's really, really important that they're able to find their footing early on the road in this last home stretch here.
Yep. And so for full context, 24 games played. They're 8-3 at home and 5-8 on the road. Naturally, you want to be at worst 500 on the road. I think that's a number that most teams shoot for when they're away from their home arena. So they got some work to do to catch up and then try to add a little bit on top of that to finish above 500 on the road. Naturally, to get to where they desire to be in terms of standings and generally past the numbers, looking at their process and impact defensively, for them to get to where they desire to be, they're going to have to be at that number on the road in particular. So looking forward to seeing that. And my question for you in all of these conversations we're having is this Phoenix Mercury team a contender to you? And kind of dive into why you say yes or why you say no in that.
Well, I have a couple of caveats because my answer is yes. But that being said, if they are met with the Connecticut Sun in the playoffs, I think that contending chance goes down drastically. And I think that their odds of meeting Connecticut early in the playoffs are pretty high at this point, which makes me personally very nervous. We've talked about it at length on this show this year. The Connecticut Sun has the Phoenix Mercury's number. They just have it. And I don't think that we're going to see anything different post-Olympic break from the Connecticut Sun. They're a really good basketball team. And for whatever reason, the Mercury just can't find their footing to beat them. And so I want to steer clear of that matchup in particular. And I have mentioned to you in passing that if they do find themselves in a good enough position to host in the playoffs, I really hope that it doesn't have to be the Indiana Fever. But outside of those two caveats, I think that this team is the super team of the playoffs. And when you think about clutch players, you think about players on the Phoenix Mercury, you think about Natasha Cloud, you think about Kahleah Copper, and you think about DT. Period. End of story when you think about clutch. And who better to step up or when more do you need someone to step up in the clutch than in the playoffs? And I think that, like I said, this team is just absolutely built for that.
I think you made some great points in that. The first of which being this team having the moxie, the chops, the makeup of a team that is built for the playoff stage in particular. I've maintained for everybody that's listening, first of all, we haven't mentioned it already, but make sure you leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate y'all for tapping in with us always. For anybody that's been listening to us consistently through the ups, through the downs, everywhere in between, BG out, BG in the lineup, Rebecca Allen in and out and in and then back out again. Diana out, Kahleah Copper being the best scorer, then the second, then third, and then back to second. All of these things, Natasha Cloud leading, and then the second in assists, and then back leading, and now in second still. All these little things within it all, I've maintained to not get too high, not to get too low with this team. They're loading up for the post-All-Star break stretch, in particular, post-Olympic break stretch. And also, this team is built for the playoffs. So I've always tried to maintain and look at it through that lens and understanding this team's process, how they can get to where they need to be at to be the team that they ultimately desire to be, but also the team that they need to be to reach those goals, because they have lofty goals. Matt Ishbia doesn't go and make the moves that he's made, shell the money out of his pocket, and do all of the little things on the periphery to facilitate to this team the way that they need to be and the way that they should be for them to just be okay with the first round appearance. That's not what this team was built for at all, not in any capacity. And that's not what they're competing for. They understand that. So they have work cut out ahead of them, but I still maintain this is a team that no one should want to see in the first round or any round in the playoffs, because Natasha Cloud has been to the WNBA Finals, has a championship. Kahleah Copper has been to the WNBA Finals, has won a championship. Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner together have been to the WNBA Finals multiple times, and they've won a WNBA championship multiple times. Sophie Cunningham has not won a championship, but she's been to that stage, and she's played an extremely integral role on a team that made it to that stage. In fact, she's the piece that was really a driving force in them upsetting the teams that they did en route to actually making it to the championship round in 2021. My point being, there are multiple pieces on this team that know what to do. Rebecca Allen hasn't won a championship, but she's a player that really hits, and her value really hits differently when you get to the playoff stage. So I'm just prefacing with all of these things to make sure that people are looking at this team through the correct lens. They might not even hit that stride that I'm saying that they need to hit post All-Star break, post Olympic break, but come playoff time, when you drown out all the noise and you're focusing on one specific team, things hit differently. And my big thing with that, looking at everything that I've spoken to with Nate Tibbetts and everything that he's been establishing in terms of process and philosophy and principles and how the team answers to the things that he challenges them with. There's a lot of things that suggest that this team is the team that I'm saying that they will be on the playoff stage. One of the big things that I'm speaking to, the receptiveness to after timeout play calls from him. We've seen some issues with them. The loudest probably being against the Indiana Fever in Phoenix when Natasha Cloud wasn't on the same page as her teammates. ATO, they turned the ball over, ended up losing that game. But they've had extremely loud ones where they're on like a 0-10 run. The opponents are on a 10-0 run against them. They call a timeout. They rewrite the sales for them after a timeout, execute, come back into the game, and then take a lead. Do the same thing defensively. They come out and they've been in man, they've been in switching, they've been in their cross matching, and then they come out after a timeout and they throw a zone at a team. Whereas Rebecca Allen or Sophie Cunningham with Kahleah Copper at the top, and they got the guards with one of the bigs underneath, and they're just able to break the rhythm of an opponent. There's these little things in receptiveness that this team consistently shows, in attention to detail, and being able to adapt on the fly over the course of a game as well, that really suggest that they're going to be a monster come playoff time. And those things continue to speak loudly to me.
I guess my big question for you, and we talked about this pretty early in the season about Kahleah Copper being an MVP candidate. Do you think this still stands? And if there is anything that Kahleah can do in the post-Olympic break to kind of reassert herself into that race and push herself into that number one contender spot over Asia?
So to answer the is Kahleah an MVP candidate question, 1,000%, absolutely. She's been a top 5 player in the WNBA consistently the entire season, and she's arguably been the most prolific scorer. Now, naturally, Big A, the reigning MVP, reigning Finals MVP, reigning champion, A'ja Wilson, it's her award to lose. That's not news in any capacity. It's hers to lose. And I do think that the work that she's shown and the growth that she's shown, she's not going to lose that this season. However, you don't take solace in finishing in second place often, but when it comes to you having to compete against A'ja Wilson for an individual award, you just kind of have to take what comes with that. And I do feel like Kahleah Copper has arguably been the second best in terms of the MVP award. Yes, you can speak to Napheesa Collier. Yes, you can absolutely speak to Sabrina Ionescu, because that New York Liberty team, with the struggles that we've seen from Breanna Stewart, Courtney Vandersloot not being in the lineup for multiple stretches, and the shifting in context of the team, Sabrina's taken that mantle as the best player on that team in multiple games this season and ran away with it. Now, yes, Jonquel Jones has some say-so in that as well, but for my betting odds, Sabrina Ionescu's been the best player on the New York Liberty this season, and she's been an MVP type of candidate. That's how impactful her game has been. And she's shown a lot of growth on the defensive side to help facilitate to that as well. There's a couple other names that you could throw in there. Obviously, Alyssa Thomas can never not be included in the MVP race. There's a couple other names in there, but I do think that at the end of the day, Kahleah Copper is going to be in the mix with those names. And to answer the second part of your question, how can she further stamp in her feet within that race? I think it's the resurfacing of her three-point shooting. And we saw a little bit of a dip prior to the Olympic/All-Star break. And I think some of that could be tired legs because they were playing with a short rotation with players being in and out of the lineup. I mean, for crying out loud, they finished the game against the Indiana Fever with 6 players. And one of those players had just been signed the day of that game. And one of the other players in that 6 was on a minutes restriction, in Rebecca Allen. So the toll and the volume that Kahleah has had to eat in terms of scoring and having to do so on consistency is something I think that she can certainly replicate, but I think that it'll come with better efficiency and therefore better effectiveness in the post-Olympic, post-All-Star break stretch. And I think one of the biggest indicators within that is going to be her efficiency from deep, whether we talked about via catch and shoots or off of the dribble 3-point attempts. I think those things are going to be important. And I do think the other big thing within that we really did see pop in that last 2.5 to 3 weeks prior to the break was her getting to the free throw line with consistency and getting to the rim at high volume. That's a space that she has to be in on consistency going forward. I think she can easily marry those two pieces of her shot profile into her process going forward, in addition to the in-between game, which has been one of the best in the W again this season. Marrying all three phases as a 3-level scorer and then adding more volume for the free throw line for her shot profile and for the team shot profile is important. If she can do that, I can see them taking those strides that they need to be that top 5, top 4 type team that I think they truly are. And going into the playoffs, that's going to certainly be the space that they need her to operate in.
And we've talked a little bit about how Sophie Cunningham is the 6th Player of the Year award contender, and I still believe this to be true. That being said, though, the circumstances around Sophie may have changed a little bit considering the luring injury of Rebecca Allen and what that really means for the Phoenix Mercury. Now, if Sophie has to move up into a starting position, which is totally plausible, how do you think that affects the Mercury in the postseason? And are there any moves that you would like to see the Mercury make immediately after the break in order to kind of negate some of the loss that will come if Beck cannot play?
Well, I'm doing a quick search right now just to see how many games Sophie has started this season. Give me 1 second with that. Let's see. Sophie has started 8 games this season. So I don't think that I do think that Rebecca Allen is going to miss a couple of weeks going into the post-Olympic stretch. I don't think she'll miss enough to where Sophie will start too many games, however. I think that's to the team's favor because obviously naturally you need Rebecca Allen back for you to be your best self. But I also think in terms of award recognition and the race that comes with that, Sophie needs to be in the role that she's been in for a majority of this season for that to kind of work out the way that it should. And I think that's important because I do feel like Sophie Cunningham is the WNBA's 6th Player of the Year this season in 2024. Because if you look across the league, in my personal opinion, the 3 biggest players that have been in her way in terms of garnering attention for that award, Kennedy Carter, she's transitioned to not just being a starter, but the best player on the Chicago Sky. Diggins-Smith Carrington has transitioned from that 6th Player of the Year role to one of the best players and one of the most impactful and most needed players in terms of scoring for the Connecticut Sun. And we know what her defense is, arguably the best perimeter defender in the entire WNBA this season. And then the third key cog in terms of 6th Player of the Year roles in the race that comes with that. Look up in Seattle, Jordan Horston. Jordan Horston has transitioned and swapped with Victoria Vivians from being that 6th player spark plug to starting the last, I think, 3.5 to almost month prior to the Olympic break. And each 3 of those players have had such a positive impact on everything that their teams have been doing in their process and evolving going forward. I don't see them reverting back and making any switches to what we saw from the beginning of the season. I think they're going to firmly stay in the starting lineup with their respective teams. So naturally, that removes 3 important pillars from the competition pool for Sophie Cunningham to have competed with. And I don't think there's another 6th player that's been in that role consistently this season that's had as much impact as she has. One name that I do think people could bring to mind, or I guess maybe 2, Leonie Fibich. She's been in and out of the starting lineup with the New York Liberty, and then another New York Liberty player because they've just been so freaking good this season, both off of metrics and off of the eye test, Kahleah Thornton. I think those are 2 names to keep in mind in terms of the 6th player race post-Olympic, post-All-Star break. However, I do still think that at this moment in time, because of the 3 names that I mentioned prior to Sophie and Jordan Horston, Diggins-Smith Carrington, and who was the third name I was speaking to, Kennedy Carter, I think that those 3 names being firmly planted in their respective starting lineups is now Sophie's award to lose. She just has to maintain and honestly even see an uptick in her impact Nate's spoken to how he could just go on for days about the impact that she has on the margins, how she performs in time to task for the team based off of matchups and all of that fun stuff. I'll certainly be doing my job and highlighting that because she's more than deserving of it and she's earned it. But the team certainly needs it in a consistent manner going post All-Star break. I do think that's her award to lose at this moment in time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And it's something we kind of argued about it a little bit at the beginning of the season about whether or not Sophie was going to start or not. But she's fit so perfectly into this role. And she's been such a key spark off the bench that at this point, I don't want her to come. I don't want her to start anymore. I'm ready for Beck Allen to be okay. Can the injury horse stop coming around the Mercury?
Yeah, I hear you. And that's why when we were having a conversation prior to the season starting, I was adamant about Sophie coming off the bench in that particular role, just because for her, she can come in and she doesn't have to play to any particular player. She doesn't have to worry about stepping on people's toes in terms of the shots she's taking. She can come in and verbatim from her, from Nate, and from Natasha Cloud, and even Kahleah Copper, let that MF fly. And that's exactly what she's been doing. That's exactly what they've wanted her to do. That's exactly what they've needed her to do. And that's exactly what she's done. And we've seen her impact in multiple stretches, not just in shooting the basketball, but doing things on the margins, setting those screens from the second side of plays to take advantage of a defense that's loading up on any primary size action, the cutting, the defense, being the first to the floor, I don't know how many times over the course of a game, sticking her nose in everything on defense, whether it's her direct matchup or helping out with her teammates, guarding up multiple positions. Sophie Cunningham is a guard, yet she plays forward consistently and even switches and guards centers and has to box out and really get into the mud with players in the paint. And that's something that I had the pleasure of speaking with her about after the game prior to the All-Star break, after the loss to the Connecticut Sun. And she spoke to them generally needing to consistently box out. Sophie's a player that consistently does so. And I think that's something that's going to really be kind of a barometer for the team going forward, as we've talked about with this team and their defensive rebounding woes that have kind of hamstrung them in multiple games this season. All of that to say, Sophie is integral to this team. She is the sixth player of the year for many of those reasons that I spoke to. And you can't just pinpoint one specific thing and everything that she's bringing to the floor consistently as the reason why she's that. And her impact also suggests that it's more than just one specific thing that she's bringing to the table that is putting her in a position to earn that reward and that award this season.
And as Mark in the comments says, she also has that dog in her. My favorite basketball stat. You know, ours too, honestly. Ours too.
Yeah, Sophie has big dog energy, 100%.
Mark he's under case letters, so we're gonna have to get on him about yelling.
Yeah,
dog.
Mark, you better come correct. I know Sophie is not a puppy. She is not a chihuahua. Big dog.
That all being said, though, I think we've done really great work today, and I'm really excited to be back again on Monday to talk about what we see from the Olympic squad on Sunday, and so on and so forth next week with the Phoenix Mercury returning back to play here in just a few short weeks. Stephen, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at StayTrueS.3. You can also find me on YouTube, Stephen Prejean Gardner 3. Always talking hoop, always breaking down things, trying to make the things happening between those four lines a little bit easier to understand, slowing things down, showing why things make sense or why something might not have made sense, you know, all of that fun stuff. So tap in with me, engage with me. So plenty of fun basketball to speak to. Let's continue to clean up the discourse space of ours, because this basketball space is supposed to be a release from everything else that you might be having going on in your life. So let's maintain it and let it be that and clean it up and make it be that game that we all have known to love over these years since we've been watching.
All of what Stephen just said and more. Follow me over on Twitter at Erika Lee Day, and that's Erika spelled with a K. And follow us both jointly together over on the PHNX_Mercury Twitter account, where Erika has all too much fun sending out the most ridiculous gifts every single day that ends in Y. That being said, though, it's been really fun, and we will see you guys next week.
We all silly like the mayor.